There's real concern that we are entering the age of the girly man.
You guys look great. Once I turn 40, let me guess, less energy, less drive.
Men these days are showing a remarkable decline in the key hormone testosterone, and it shows.
Men are not who they were.
This week, we look at what's being called low T, the mystery behind the causes, and how it could seriously impact generations in the future. Cuba is the closest communist nation to the U.S., just 90 miles south of Florida, and for decades caught in back-and-forth policies by presidents and now a new Trump administration.
President Trump were very vocal on the idea that they would take advantage of this new administration to try to even put more pressure on Cuba.
We've covered Cuba through 4 administrations and asked a senior Cuban diplomat about a potential turning point. And as the country still struggles to adapt from the post-COVID nightmare, we talk with a doctor who's influencing a significant new approach.
What is your basic philosophy on healthcare?
We've got to talk about food as medicine. We can't just fund chemotherapy drugs and let pharma control the healthcare field and all of research and discovery.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Odds are you've heard of low T. That's the pharmaceutical industry's name for testosterone deficiency in men. There's a lot of attention given to treating it, but far less emphasis on a national health crisis, mysteriously declining testosterone levels in American men population-wide. Today we ask, what happens when a society's males become less manly, with no firm answers as to why it's happening?
For reasons unexplained, something very big and potentially very bad is happening to American men. On average, they've been losing an alarming amount of the crucial hormone that quite literally makes them men, and nobody has identified exactly why, though it's been the topic of much discussion and speculation.
But you want to know the real reason why so many men are weak and feminine? It's because we've been living in the good times. We've been in the good times for a while.
This has coincided with a substantial drop in men's testosterone levels in the US since the 80s.
According to Dr. Thomas Travison and his colleagues behind one such study, the average levels of the male hormone are dropping by about 1% per year.
Surgeons are also conducting an all-time record number of operations to reduce man boobs.
So testosterone peaks in the late teen years and the early 20s.
Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, a Harvard testosterone researcher, says he began seeing patients with testosterone deficiency in the late 1980s. The men were desperate for help for sexual dysfunction. He treated them with testosterone replacements and is consulted for a company that makes a therapy. Dr. Morgentaler says there are different ideas about what exactly is too low and what treatment, if any, men should get. But scientists say there's no doubt that male hormone levels have shrunk in recent decades. And we're not talking about common age-related decline. Men in their 40s today, on average, have significantly less of the male sex hormone than their fathers did when they were 40.
So the data are actually pretty clear that testosterone levels are declining over the last 50 years or so.
Can you give us in a time frame of what we know or what the estimates are?
Well, it depends on the study, and there have been several, but it ranges anywhere from 10 to about 20% testosterone over the last 40 to 50 years.
So what age? Let's equate that to a man.
So most of the studies are not in younger men, actually, but middle-aged men.
All right, a man 45 years old.
Right. So today the average testosterone level is about 450 nanograms per deciliter, we say. There's a lot of variation from one person to another, but that's an average of middle-aged, relatively healthy men. So what was it 40, 50 years ago? It was probably around 500 or 550.
On top of that, it's estimated that many millions of men have testosterone levels well below the current lower average. The problem is reported elsewhere, but is said to be much worse in the U.S. than other parts of the world.
It's hugely prevalent. affects about 1 out of 3 adult men over the age of 40. And not only does it cause symptoms that make the men not feel so good, but it's associated with important health issues.
When testosterone is low, it means the testicles aren't producing an adequate amount. That can lead to all kinds of signs and symptoms, including lower sex drive, erectile dysfunction, fatigue, brain fog, loss of muscle mass and strength, more body fat, weight gain, breast growth, sleep problems, mood swings, weak bones, and fertility problems.
The primary symptoms I was experiencing was mostly being tired as the main one, not maybe being as sharp as I was, not being able to think of things that I could previously do.
A little bit more irritable with the kids, feeling tired at work, mind was foggy, not as sharp as it used to be.
So just by the fact of having a low testosterone puts a man at double the risk of later on developing diabetes, obesity, and what's called the metabolic syndrome, which is a set of things that predisposes to cardiovascular disease. It's a lot. And if we look at associations of low testosterone, we look at things like dementia, depression. Testosterone is the single, in my opinion, the single most important blood test that tells us about the health status of a man.
Yet it's noteworthy that a health issue impacting men on a societal level isn't the topic of urgent research to pinpoint causes. The answer as to why that's the case might partly rest with the fact that a lot of money is made treating testosterone deficiency, not so much figuring out how to prevent it. There's no shortage of doctors to treat men with what the pharmaceutical industry dubs low T, and no shortage of testosterone replacement gels, injections, implants, patches, and pills. Treatments can run up to $1,000 a month.
Hello, welcome to T-Town. Like men over 40 everywhere. These guys experience a drop in testosterone. Don't worry, it happens to all of us. Can you believe this? Doug Flutie and Frank Thomas. You guys look great. Once I turn 40, let me guess, less energy? Less drive? Definitely.
Based on what you've described, I would say this sounds like a chronic, urgent health issue, something that's not happening to just a couple of people, but something that's population-wide.
Right. And where people are focused has been on testosterone as a treatment. And while that's really important and extremely useful for men who are deficient in testosterone, what's been ignored is having the condition of testosterone deficiency and how much it reduces the human condition. Men are not who they were. They've lost something. They lose their sense of humor. They lose their ability to be great partners.
There are studies that point to pieces of the puzzle, but the researchers we asked didn't want to do interviews about their work. They've found that countless things in our environment are hormone or endocrine disruptors and could be impacting testosterone levels. These include pesticides, additives, and other chemicals in our food, water, and medicine.
People talk a lot about what are called endocrine disruptors, things in our environment that appear to affect not just humans, but other animals in terms of their sexual development and things like that. And then the latest thing is we got plastics everywhere, microplastics, nanoplastics. That's so recent in terms of sort of general awareness that I don't think it's been studied with regard to testosterone. But nanoplastics and microplastics have been identified within the testicles of humans, and that's where the source of testosterone is. So there certainly could be a connection.
Whatever the causes, the declining testosterone in American men could affect how society works.
Anything with a backbone, fish, reptiles, birds, mammals, they all have testosterone. So we've been castrating, removing the testicles and the source of testosterone in domesticated animals for 10,000 years, right? And the observation is the same in every species, which is that the male tends to become more passive. Certainly men who have low levels of testosterone don't have the get up and go to do often what they've done in their male positions, whether it's within a family structure, whether it's within a business organization or whatever.
Text fresh.
For now, business is booming when it comes to treatment. Testosterone replacement therapy is raking in nearly $2 billion a year.
What are the implications in behavior of the male American species if testosterone levels have decreased that much over a short period of time? What do we expect to see in reality?
The doomsday scenario, if things continue the way they are, is not only that testosterone levels decline, but also sperm numbers. And there's evidence that sperm numbers are declining too. They're both made in the testicle. We could have sexual problems that are more prevalent. And sex is actually about reproduction, right? So that if men can't perform sexually to a certain extent, that may affect birth rates, which are already going down in the Western developed world anyway. I think it's possible, but I hope we never get there, that fertility will be reduced, that men will have more and more difficulty being sexual and active and physical, and that men will start feeling old before their time, and society will feel the impact of all of that.
The same exposures disrupting hormones in men could be disrupting the hormonal balance in women, but there seems to be no major public effort to get to the bottom of that either. Ahead on Full Measure, simmering tensions and tangled ties between the U.S. and Cuba. Our closest communist neighbor in terms of proximity is Cuba, and that island nation has experienced ups and downs under the past few presidents. After Obama loosened long-standing travel restrictions, Trump and Biden tightened them back up, and then some. Today, we speak with a top Cuban official about the prospects that the U.S.-Cuba relationship will get better or worse during Donald Trump's second term.
When we visited Cuba a year and a half ago, we found economic changes as the island nation grappled with a dire economy. For the first time in decades, Cuba began allowing private ownership of small and medium-sized businesses, now numbering more than 11,000. Still, Cuba is suffering critical shortages of food, fuel, and medicine, and double-digit inflation. The enduring U.S. embargo and its ripple effects deter Western nations from trading with Cuba. That's led Cuba to forge ties with the most willing major powers, Russia and China. I recently spoke with Cuba's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Carlos Fernandez de Cosio, at our U.S. studios.
So the second Trump administration comes in and makes some changes against Cuba. Do you all get alerted before that? Is there any diplomatic relationship at all? Were there discussions that take place prior to that?
Formally, there are diplomatic relationships, but there hasn't been any communication real communication, since the new administration came in. So the measures are just announced by the media. We learn when they're in the media.
You were surprised?
No, truly no. Because the current Secretary of State and some of the people that accompanied the campaign with President Trump were very vocal on the idea that they would take advantage of this new administration to try to even put more pressure on Cuba, to be able, with this administration, to mobilize the full weight of the United States to try to punish the people of Cuba even more.
So a couple of specifics that were announced by Secretary Rubio let you answer these things. President acted on his first day in office to keep Cuba on the SST, the terrorism list, where it belongs, he said. We call for the regime to end its support for terrorism and stop providing food, housing, and medical care to foreign murderers, bomb makers, and hijackers while Cubans go hungry and lack access to basic medicine. What are they referring to when they refer to your support for terrorism and food, housing, and medical care?
Now, there have been accusations in the U.S. against Cuba. And Cuba follows protocols that every country follows, that are supported by international law and by Cuban law, by which we give protection for people who are persecuted for political reasons. Now, the Secretary of State in the United States is in a very bad position to claim something like this. Because in the United States, specifically in the community where he comes from, there are dozens of people, some already passed and some still alive, that have committed heinous crimes in Cuba. One of them, who already passed, was once qualified by the U.S. authorities as the most important terrorist that exists in the Western Hemisphere. And he died peacefully, undisturbed in this country. So,
What was his name?
Luis Posada Carriles. He passed a few years back. He was, among others, responsible for blowing up a civil plane in 1976 in midair. Until September 11, 2001, it was considered the biggest terrorist attack in the Western Hemisphere. He was responsible for that, and he died peacefully in this country.
I doubt this would happen, but if President Trump were to say, I will sit down with your leader and give you a list of things that I feel, meaning President Trump, have to be done for us to have relationships, would you welcome something like that, regardless of whether you would agree with what's on the list?
I can't speak for my leader, but I can guess that we would be ready to sit down to discuss anything with the United States, and we would also have our list. And I'm sure that no president should fear to be able to sit down and discuss each other's lists. That's what countries do.
And lastly, what would you like the American people to know? We spoke before that probably when Americans hear something about Cuba, it may frequently be through the eyes of whatever government is in charge here. What would you like them to know, speaking directly?
Cuba is not an adversary of the United States, nor an enemy, nor do we want to be an enemy of the United States. We wish we could have peaceful relationship. We wish Americans would not be prohibited by their government to travel to Cuba, to have trade with Cuba, to have financial in Cuba, to visit Cuba, to have academic, religious, artistic, scientific, as countries around the world do. For us, the only exception is the U.S. We relate in that manner with the rest of the world, and we wish we could do that with the United States, that this prohibition did not exist for the whole of the American people in response to a very narrow interest of our group of people in this country.
Right now, the U.S. permits travel to Cuba under limited circumstances, such as for educational purposes. That would further tighten if Cuba is included in an absolute travel ban that could be installed by the Trump administration. Coming up on Full Measure, blind spots in medicine. Sometimes it feels like we're still pulling out of a COVID coma, grappling with how much our medical authorities got wrong. Dr. Marty Makary says that adds to a long pre-COVID list. He's a professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Dr. Makary says blind spots in his own profession created the opioid epidemic and got virtually everything wrong about diet, resulting in making America fatter and less healthy. We interviewed him before he was confirmed as President Trump's head of the FDA. What is your basic philosophy on health care?
We in medicine have to start talking about these giant blind spots. We've got to talk about food as medicine. We can't just fund chemotherapy drugs and let pharma control the healthcare field and all of research and discovery. We have the most medicated generation in the history of the world. And we can keep throwing more meds at people, or we can actually take a step back and talk about general body inflammation and the microbiome and environmental exposures that cause cancer, not just the chemotherapy to treat it. So these are the big questions that a new generation of doctors are asking. They don't get funding or support from the government and the NIH and the traditional academic oligarchy, but they are doing work now and making discoveries that are turning modern medicine upside down.
To what do you attribute what you call blind spots? Because these are things our doctors should know about. Are they not taught in medical school? Are you guys not taught to look for answers to these problems rather than just treatments?
Medical school is totally broken because we take these bright, creative young minds and we beat them with this memorized regurgitation mindset. And they lose this sense of awareness and interpersonal skills and the ability to be compassionate sometimes and to talk the language of everyday folks. And the biggest problem in medicine today is that we don't have the ability to say, I don't know, when the right answer is, I don't know, many times. There's two types of doctors. Those that have humility, that use basic scientific principles and their clinical wisdom, and they win the trust of their patients. And there are others that are just reciting some catechism from an organized medical elite that says you got to drink 3 glasses of cow's milk a day or whatever the recommendation is that's based on dogma. So when modern medicine uses good clinical studies and scientific principles, we shine, we help a lot of people. When we make recommendations based on opinion, things we just make up, we have a lousy track record and we can harm a lot of people.
What would you say is the takeaway for people if there is one coming from blind spots?
When we listen to rank and file doctors who are using their wisdom and basic scientific principles, we shine as a profession. We can help a lot of people and we win the trust of our communities. But when we make stuff up and we get it wrong time and time again, and we don't have the humility to say, I don't know when we don't know, or we got it wrong, we told you the wrong thing, then we lose a tremendous amount of trust. And right now in America, we have an epidemic of distrust, and it's going to hurt people.
Also in his book, Blind Spots, Dr. McCary talks about the government's stance on bird flu. After a break, an update to the effort to change the way we vote. An update to our reporting on the often confusing system of ranked choice voting that advocates are pushing to install in lots of elections. We first tried to dissect the pros and cons with an expert on each side in March of last year.
Ranked choice voting is a better way to vote. It gives voters the option to rank the candidates on their ballot. It gives voters more power, and it promotes majority winners in our elections, something we're not doing a good job of right now.
And how would you describe it?
The place where we disagree is whether it supports majority outcomes. So it supports the majority outcomes of the last 2 candidates, but it doesn't always support the majority outcome among all the candidates. And at least recent history has shown that in the presence of certain types of electorates, candidates that have true majority support don't actually get selected.
Here's where things stand now. Park City, Utah just approved ranked choice voting for upcoming City Hall elections. West Virginia just banned it. In last November's election, Washington, D.C. approved ranked choice voting for federal and municipal elections starting next year. Voters narrowly decided to keep it in Maine and in Alaska after a close recount. They rejected it in Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, and Oregon, and it was banned in Missouri, except for St. Louis. Right now, there's a push to consider ranked choice voting in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Denver, Colorado. And in about a week, the Heber City, Utah Council will decide whether to keep the system. Coming up next week on Full Measure, Donald Trump's second term is bringing seismic changes in the media landscape.
I think it cuts both ways. I actually think it's high time that a change be made because the media landscape has changed so much.
I'll examine a major media shift under Trump 2.0 on the next Full Measure. Until next time, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. Thanks for watching.